Let there be light.
Hey, all right. We are live. Guys, welcome to No Driving Gloves, the gloves off approach to the automotive hobby and industry podcast. Normally coming to you live on Thursday night, which we are doing tonight. And the audio recording, it comes out when it does. So
It's
tonight,
worth the wait.
it is. It's always worth the wait. As you can see, tonight we only have the double D's. Dave and Derek are with you tonight. John is off tonight. He has some family obligations he's taking care of. So we thought tonight we'd talk about some automotive taboos and get a little taboo storytelling going on, maybe. But before we do that, Dave, what have you been up to automotive-wise?
I mean, I have been doing something that would fascinate anybody, which is taking a deep dive into the history of a tiny little Carter one barrel. So,
being that we are doing the taboo show, size doesn't matter, Dave.
no, well, and it's if they're smaller, you can use more of them, which
That's
some people
true.
are into that. So, you don't want to like, say you've got a Model A engine and you want to run two carburetors on it. You can't run two Stromberg 97s because that's like 441 cubic inches of, potential displacement going on to 200 cubic inches. So most people run a pair of 81s, which are off of a V860, which is, they're only 136 cubic inches. So what is that? 272 cubic inches of potential. So that's better, but I figure the Carter W0, which was most famously used on the Willys Jeep during and after World War II, was only intended for 134 cubic inches on the Jeep, and then actually came in smaller varieties. So it's a pretty good size mixer, I think, if you want to run a pair of them on a fairly mild, not super large displacement engine, like I would like to do for essentially the looks of it, because downdrafts were high tech in the early 30s, and a pair of them would be, just absolutely the bee's knees if you were trying to show off your engine technology. But
so then are we starting on a new project? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, I would very much like to own a Model A style of car before I die, which I'm not intending to do anytime soon. And my life has changed sufficiently from a driving standpoint where, much as I love my Corvair, I'm not using it. I used it to get around, like when I had to go to the office and this kind of thing. And now that I have a different job and I'm not in an office, and instead I'm going down like sketchy dirt roads in the middle of winter, I'm taking the F-250 everywhere, and it doesn't make sense. The Corvair is redundant, and if I could get away with just having the Corvair, I would, but I need the F-250 for the bed and such, which leads me to the point where if I'm going to have a third car around that's kind of redundant, it might as well be far less practical even than the Corvair, which means, the Model A early Ford experience that I've always wanted. So what I'd like to do is turn the Corvair into about $5,200 in cash and invest that in a Model A chassis that somebody's pulled out from underneath, an older restoration that they're going to street rod or something, so that I get good engine, good axles, good brakes, good trans. And then I can just find an orphaned Model T touring car body, preferably like a 24, 25, attach that and sort of have the low budget gouge job experience. And then if I want to upgrade that over time with, say, dual carburetors or, a different cylinder head or whatever, I can do that. But I don't have to jump in with both feet financially to create a car that will keep up with modern traffic the way I was going to have to when I had a Model T project that was like all Model T. Like I love Ts, but a stock T is happiest about 35 miles an hour. And that's just not something that you can get away with without, a lot of modification or very careful selection of your routes. And I just want something that's more versatile than that. So I figure this will be like, a zip code plus car, something that I can rip around the county in, sort of like it was a hardtail motorcycle or something, go into town for groceries, take the kids out for ice cream, go on a color tour, that kind of thing. And then I've got the truck, for my serious business oriented driving. So yeah, sort of another project, but I mean, nothing has happened with it except for me doing a lot of thinking, because thinking and research and drawing things are largely free. So I do a lot of that
yeah.
before I make any moves.
You got to build it on paper first, right?
Yeah. Sometimes that's as far as they get.
And I think, Dave, you and I should maybe, I want to pause here. Dave, well, as everybody knows, Dave and I met in college. We've been friends now for way too many years. But I think something that Dave and I share in common is an appreciation for a lot of the earlier cars, but also a lot of, how the car plays into society and culture
Oh yeah.
and that history. And I don't think, John probably not as much into this, so bring it up on this episode. But I think Dave and I would be remiss to not mention, and we try not to talk too much about passings of famous people on the show, but Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys passed away, and I think there were probably many times in college that Dave and I listened to some, Pet Sounds and different albums of the Beach Boys while we were either studying or just talking cars or whatever we were up to. So probably should mention that, Brian, and everybody knows Brian passed away. Big loss to the music world, but also I think to the automotive world a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, Brian Wilson was absolutely the voice of his generation. I mean, my dad had all of the early Beach Boys albums that he bought when he was a teenager. He graduated high school in 1965, so like right at the height of that. And sitting around with my dad talking about him cruising on Woodward Avenue and driving his 65 GTO and installing floor shifters in 57 Chevys. I mean, like I felt like I experienced a lot of that 60s carefree life secondhand through him. I mean, I absolutely loved learning about that era, and the Beach Boys were the soundtrack of that. And I've gained a lot of respect for the Beatles over the years, but I often felt that if you were the typical American teenager of say 1963, that it was the Beach Boys who were speaking a lot more toward your aspirations and things than I guess 63 is not fair to the Beatles. 64 we're speaking a lot more to your life and your aspirations. Of course, it might be equally fair to observe that the Beatles' popularity, especially in Britain, was largely driven by their female audience. So maybe, in fact, what you're actually looking at there is the Beach Boys are telling sort of what the guys wanted out of the 60s, and the Beatles are telling sort of what the girls wanted out of the 60s. Might be a fairer interpretation. But regardless, I'm with you. I mean, the car is special to me, not in a vacuum. It's how it interacted with its time and place, and what it says about that time and place in retrospect. And yeah, no, I mean, and that's true of like my desire to own an early 30s style gal job is like, I'm fascinated by that interwar era when my own grandparents were teenagers. The people that in their 20s and early 30s went and fought World War II, but dealing with their own collapsed economy and scary things going on overseas, and yet that Yankee ingenuity. I mean, the gal job thing. America went to World War II as a nation of mechanics, and the Jeep, of course, plays into that. And that's another reason that it would be really neat to run a W0, is because you can point at it and say, like, that's the carburetor that won World War II. Because
it would be fitting, because the soldiers that were coming back, the GIs coming back, understood that carburetor. So
although I mean, to be honest, for me, the WO is more standing in for the Tillotson, because my original idea, the reason my Model T project was called Tilly, was because I wanted to run a pair of downdraft Tillotsons off of 33 Willas, but those Tillotsons were made of pot metal, and so like none of them are salvageable anymore. And the WO, being its direct replacement on the Americar in 1940, gives it a spiritual cachet. And then so my entire excitement at learning that, oh, these were actually being produced as early as 1932 for the 1933 Opel 1.3 liter means that it's technically a period correct 30s carburetor, even though I'd almost be certainly using a 40s version because the Jeep ones are just absolutely the most common ones you'll find.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. And to go back to I liked your comparison of the Beach Boys and the Beatles. Never thought of it that way, but very true. But I think there might be some people that are like, oh, the Beach Boys, 1950s, 60s surf car music. What's so taboo about that? Seeing, we're bringing it up on the automotive taboo episode, but I encourage everyone to go back and listen to Little Deuce Coupe because it's about racing and. Uh, Daddy took the T-Bird away. I can't remember the actual name of
Fun,
that.
fun, fun.
Fun, fun, fun. Thank you.
Yeah, she's out street
It's about a
racing.
girl that's out street racing and
Mhm.
kind of, probably picking up some boys. She wasn't going to the library like she told her old man now.
Don't worry, baby. He's
Yeah,
talking about a race, and it's probably not at the drag strip.
exactly. So, it kind of fits the taboo theme too. They were talking about singing about, I should say, the things that were going on in the 50s and 60s that weren't necessarily acceptable to what society's norms were in the post-war era, right? It was the young kids that were changing the scene of the automotive landscape. And of course, what eventually would lead to the, Southern California Timing Association to get them off the street and get them to Bonneville and the Dry Lakes to race there rather than the street. So they're kind of fitting to the Taboo show as well, I think.
Well, and there's just the point that most guys of our generation absolutely despise hearing doo-wop or the Beach Boys at a car show. So even us admitting to like it at our age
and I mean, even
is
Dave
taboo.
And I mean, Dave and I think, we have an appreciation for it, but we're probably both sick of hearing it at every car cruise, car show we go to. I know I am. No offense,
I actually am not. It's funny because I I think one of the reasons I probably started liking that music was because I associated with going to car shows, and so to this day it doesn't bother me. And if I hear Duke of Earl or something randomly, I'm like, yeah, I get that good vibe, like it's 1993 and I'm back at the Merc Deuce reunion with my dad.
yeah. Well, and maybe it's if so long as the music is, as you say, kind of a random selection. Like I get tired of it just being all 50s music at a car show when the cars range from the, let's say the teens, because there's likely a Model T at most car cruise-ins. Most, at least one weirdo like me shows up. But it goes all the way up to, cars of the 90s and stuff. So I guess I get sick of just the DJ thinking I'm at a car show, I need to play one genre of music. Like we got to get past
So
that.
so if we need to hear everything from like the Gin Blossoms back to like In My Merry Oldsmobile, I could be your guy. I've got like, that sounds like my playlist, actually my favorites list on Spotify.
I would respect that 100%. So
yeah. Well, folks, you heard it here. I am available to curate your next automotive event, and I provide witty intermittent batter and probably even like trivia. I could come up with some trivia, like what magnetized accessory, Derek, did the 1958 Cadillac Eldorado include for its owner's convenience in the glove box?
1958?
Yeah, that's the one with the brushed stainless top, the one that cost like $10,000 and was probably being sold at a loss. The one that was designed to crush Lincoln's desire to get back into the top luxury market because Cadillac would just undercut them.
Was that the year they had the makeup kit and tissue and everything? Is that what you're talking about?
I associate makeup kit and tissue with the Dodge La Femme, but maybe. But those weren't magnetized to my knowledge.
Well, but the La Femme was a concept car, not a production car.
La Femme was production model.
Oh yeah, you're
55
right.
and 56. In fact, in 56, there was one D500 La Femme built.
Okay.
Imagine that. There's like, yeah, I got my matching my lipstick and my umbrella, my parasol, and I got my dual quad Hemi. It's the best of both worlds. I'm a happy lady when I put my white gloves on. I go to the grocery store, I burn rubber, leaving the lot.
And then do a little street racing, right?
Yeah, and then she does a little street racing, and she grows up to become, of course, the little old lady from Pasadena who is still driving a Dodge, but by that point has graduated to a super stock level.
Indeed.
You,
So
you,
enlighten us. What was the magnetized accessory? Because I don't.
oh, it's whiskey tumblers, the most inappropriate taboo thing you could put
that
in an
is
automobile.
right. Yes. That's right. Forgot about that.
I think about that every time I flip down one of my glove box doors, and it's got the little like drink holder depressions.
Yeah.
Like
But
the Cadillac does not have drink holders.
There were car accessories in the 20s and 30s that some type of bar accessory for automobiles. There was actually an ad that I've seen many times for a dash mounted keg, like a pony keg that would go up under the dash and have a tap come out. We're talking about the kind of post prohibition era or pre-prohibition era, depending on
Or
which
during prohibition. Yeah.
or during, right? I mean, it's root beer, I swear. Um,
Well, and I mean the term
and then there were a number of cars that, there were a number of cars that had like a bar set in like station wagons, things like shooting brakes over in Europe were, a number of those had an accessory bar that you could have in the back of the shooting brake. Of course, you weren't supposed to be driving around drinking your whiskey or your scotch, but while you were, I don't know what's worse, drinking and driving, or going out in your shooting brake on a hunt and being like, well, let's break into the fine Scotch, gentlemen, and shoot our rifles and shotguns.
Listen, I can't speak for like birding on the moors or anything, but I will say the little tipple always made me a better skier. So it might make me a better shot too, but there's definitely a point of diminishing returns there.
Yeah, you got to know your balance, right?
This your point about booze cruising reminds me though of a great tie-in with our automotive taboo song, and possibly the first rock and roll song, Rocket 88 by Jackie Brenston and his Delta Cats, i.e. Ike Turner. Everybody in my car is going to take a little nip because they went down to the corner and they bought a pint or a quart, or I forget what it is, a fifth. They bought a fifth.
Yeah. I was like,
so they're driving around in a new Oldsmobile convertible. Yeah. Everybody's sharing this fifth. Well, and I mean, 4 on the floor and a fifth under the seat. I mean, it's amazing how long it took drinking and driving to become actually taboo in our society. I mean, what's the in North by Northwest when they pour him full of bourbon and they try to point him at the cliff in the sports car and he manages to get away, but the cops pull him over and he's throwing this scene, right? Because he's like, I didn't do this to myself. It was forced on me. And his mother goes, darling, just pay the $5. I mean, $5 was more money in 1962, but I mean, not tremendously more. I mean, it was, so I don't, and people had a different attitude, especially toward beer, I think in the pre-prohibition era, and then not caring about the law at all kind of came out of the prohibition era because people were like, well, I regularly break the law and so does everybody I know, so why not break a few more while we're at it?
Yeah. Well, and beer was for so long just more of a truly kind of a replacement for dirty water, right? I mean, it was intended to be the drink that you had instead of the terrible water that you might have somewhere. So speaking of taboo, we actually had a listener to the show, one of our wonderful No Driving Globe community members, send in a commentary, which actually kind of led to the show, to be honest. And I am going to kind of read that so we can have a wonderful conversation about it. That is, if I should have left it pulled up, and I didn't. Foolish me. Here we go. So
yeah, it was a powerful statement. I probably couldn't bear to look at it much longer.
So I have a topic for the podcast. the ugliest popular automotive styling trends for the time. I nominate the skinny or narrow white wall of the late 1970s through the mid 1980s. My father had a love for them, and he put them on his kick ass gunmetal gray 56 T Bird. So heinous. Popular in the day, but why? They suck. I mean, that's pretty strong words. So I think, personally, I think you kind of got to go back in history and kind of look at when the narrow white wall, skinny white wall, really kind of became or started to become popular. Which I think Dave and I agree is, in Europe, kind of in the early, slipping into the mid '50s, and then here in the U.S a little later in the 1950s.
58
And
is generally agreed to be the year the skinny white broke in America because the
yeah,
Corvette got it that year and the aforementioned Cadillac Eldorado got it that year. And then
yeah,
from there till 61 is sort of everything after 61 gets skinny whites. So, I mean, in a way, part of the objection here simply is the fact that he's talking about an era that's 20 years after they came out. So they were a has-been trend by then.
exactly. But the question is, why did they hang on so long? And I see, to me, although on the Cadillac it was a little, I mean, the Cadillac, it made a suggestion, but most of the cars I'm used to seeing them on, and that I think they look fairly good on or decent on, are relatively small tire cars, right? The Falcon, you've got 13s on a Falcon,
Not if
and
I
some
run
of
one.
the, well, not anyway,
I just put
on a
14s on the
stock Falcon when they came out of the factory, uh, but and even in Europe, you had much smaller tires over there. They were 13s roughly as well. Um, and the narrow white looked right. To me, it looked right on the tire, right? Because you don't want this giant white wall on this tiny tire. But in the 70s and 80s, you have to admit the giant cars of that period, the malaise period, if you will, they kind of looked hokey. They didn't look right. And as you said, Dave, they were kind of a has been, fad by that point, or a has been design cue. So, yeah, like
well, but
why did it stick around?
so with so much of those Baroque 70s cars. I mean, opera windows and Landau bars and padded roofs and the vertical radiator grills. I mean, they're cosplaying 30s cars, right? So no wonder they want to wear white walls. In some ways, they should have just gone whole hog and gone maybe back to at least a medium white wall, if not a wide. Although maybe a sugar donut's too over the top for those cars. But I think it's like the skinny white, and I don't mean like the pinner white. Like there's a pinstripe white that's like a red line tire too. But we're talking about maybe an inch wide white wall. It was sort of like the logical endpoint of the white wall game, like because tires were all white to begin with, right? And then we
Natural.
put the carbon black on them so they didn't look unsightly after a while, and then as a mark of luxury, we brought back some of the white, and so having that little strip of white, I mean, it says Lux, right? But where do you go once you've kind of skinnied it down for that space age, jet age look? And so they've never really changed. I mean, you can still go out and buy a 1958 appropriate width white wall striped tire in a modern radial today for your, I don't know, Buick Roadmaster or whatever.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
because it never changed. Of course, you can go out and buy wide whites now easier than you could 20 years ago. But um,
I think, and this is getting off topic a little bit, still on tires. I think we're missing the fad of the black wall tire.
a fad? I mean, I,
Well,
I,
okay, not a
I would
fad.
never have called it a fad,
Well, but no, what I'm referring
at
to
least
is
not with the OEMs.
the true black wall tire, where the tread was still white. For a period of time in the 20s and early 30s, there were tires that were black walls with white tread.
Wow, I did not know that. I would love to see one of those. See,
There's I've seen pictures of a few in collections, and people that have found them and saved them. and then a few images from historical images that I've been able to track down, and every once in a while we'll catch a glimpse of one, but they're rare to see. There were also some colored tires back in the day. There were some red. They did obviously the used red rubber to make some
Like
red tires.
erasers.
There were some very interesting things going on with tires in the 20s and 30s.
I have a modest collection of old tires because I'm nuts. And one of them's a 19-inch mobile tire with the flying red horse on it and everything, and the Saucony vacuum trademark. And I've got an 18-inch Miller, and the Miller ads, they all say geared to the road, and so does the sidewall of this tire. So yeah, I'm a bit of a tire nerd, but it's surprisingly hard to find good histories on tires alone. Like, there's a lot of anecdotes out there, but nobody's sat down and been like, here's a technological and cultural history of the automobile tire from 1893 to the present.
Yeah. Well, maybe I know what I need to do with my life.
There you go. You could be the tire guy.
Yeah.
Related.
Let me tell you about rubbers. Car rubbers.
You know, the word rubber refers to its ability to remove marks, as in erasers.
Yes. Yeah.
I only recently learned that. So
you would rub the material. Yeah.
This is rubber. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, what do you think about the narrow white wall of the 1970s and 1980s, Dave? Taboo or not?
Yeah, I don't hate it. I'm actually, it's funny because Crystal drives a 1983 Cadillac, which came to us with skinny white walls on it, and no longer has them, and looks tough as hell with black walls on it. And I have no intention of going back.
Now, do you just have Steelies on it?
No, I consider that. I've taken the wheel covers off, and they've actually got the nubs I could run center caps, and I was this close to buying like generic GM branded center caps, but it's hard enough for Crystal to drive an 83 Cadillac. I can't make it weirder on her. Okay. Like that would not be fair. If it was my car, it would be something like that. But I did have skinny white walls on 15-inch black Steelies with dog dish hubcaps on my Camaro. Not when you probably remember it, but later on. I had those hubcaps for about a decade before I finally got my hands on those wheels, because even though every Caprice in the 80s had a set of those 15-inch steel wheels, they all got taken off and welded together to make jack stands in the junkyards. So there just aren't a ton of them floating around. But anyway, my dad called that the Rambler look, the skinny white wall with the dog dish. And it's, it's deliberately nerdy, but it's sort of like a Superbird kind of look, because those cars were intended to have mags put on them as soon as you took them home. So why put a big fancy wheel cover on it?
Right. Now, 83 Cadillac. See, to me, what I see when I see an 83 Cadillac is the narrow white wall, but you got to have the gold line with it.
Oh, like Vogues. Yeah, that's purely an aftermarket thing, but that is super. That is not something that Crystal's grandpa would have done, though. He did not. But he would have probably worn the big floppy hat with the feather in it before he would have put
sweet
gold striped Vogues on his Cadillac.
So Jason just joined us in the comments section and said he was just now able to jump on in to watch the show, and all I saw was Taboo in the title. You have my full attention. And Jason, yes, we are going Taboo tonight. Right now we're talking about the taboo use of skinny or narrow white wall tires in the 70s and 80s, and how terrible it was. Well, on certain cars, right? And on some cars it was okay. But
I had skinny whites on my 50 Studebaker Champion, and I did not like that. I didn't have a choice because I didn't have the money for a different set of tires in the time that I owned it. But it was definitely going to get either wide whites or pure black walls in bias ply. But it had, cheap skinny white wall radials. So that is a place that I hate skinny whites. Like anything pre, say, 1952 with skinny whites is a no-no. Like if you run them on something
Right.
50s, like the original Commander's 56 T-Bird, it just says it's 1962 and wide whites are out, and my car still runs white walls, but they're with the times. But if you have a 1938 Chevy with skinny white walls on it, it just looks like you wanted white walls but couldn't afford proper ones.
Yeah.
Especially the stocker the car is.
Yes, exactly. Now, what about the double narrow white walls?
Oh, the only thing I've ever seen those on is my grandparents' dock up in Grand Lake, Michigan, because they might have been triple band white walls, and they were like heavy lug snow tires with the provisions for the spikes. And when they retired them, they put them on the dock, and they looked amazing. I was like, man, I want something with 4 of these on it because they look like they go anywhere, and they're triple band white walls. I'm not sure what they had those on originally. Maybe their Charger. They had a 68 Charger like the guys in Bullet,
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember any like double or triple white walls being stock out of the factory.
No.
They were all
That's an aftermarket thing. But
Yeah.
think how brief of a lifespan tires used to have too. I mean, modern tires last stupid long, like to the point where we've got to have expiration dates on the rubber now because the tread isn't wearing out. But I mean, you used to change tires every couple of years in the 50s and 60s. So you could cycle through a different couple types. I mean, even back in the 30s, they were offering like some weird sidewall designs if you had a little extra cash during the Depression. Like I think I've got some photos of like Lee tires in the 30s with like maybe a weird checkerboard pattern on them or something.
Yeah. That was when they were doing some of the color stuff, where it'd be like I think there was one that was like a red checkerboard as well.
Okay.
Yeah, there were some weird things going on. I don't think
Well, they've tried to make scented tires at various times.
Yeah. The lavender the
Yeah.
lavender scented tires. I remember those.
Light up tires have been a thing, just like light up roller skates.
Yes.
None of them have quite caught on, though. I'm surprised the light up tires haven't. I mean, if it's the next logical extension, if you've got like the under chassis lighting on your Ricer or your Brodozer.
Yeah, probably the most famous car for that, I would say, is probably the Golden Sahara. You remember the Golden Sahara Custom? Had
I
the light up
I know
glow
it by
lights.
name only, oddly, but it's from a period of customs that I do not care for the indoor car show era of customs, say,
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, like 55 to whenever.
Yeah, till today.
Till today. Yeah. But so yeah, I'm familiar with the Golden Sahara by name, but I know it's from that era where I probably would not be adequately appreciative of the restyling touches versus whatever it started out as. Because I'm the kind of guy that is like, I would drive a stock looking 53 Plymouth. I might do something to hop it up, but I'm fine with the way it looks, just as a 53 Plymouth. To say nothing of say a 49 or 50 Mercury. Like, it's fine that Mercury Customs exist. I like a lot of them, but no more of them need to be modified at this point. Like, we just need to preserve the few Mercury coupes we have left from that 49 to 51 era.
Yeah, let's hope Will's not listening tonight. No.
Yeah, there's always somebody. I mean, like guys that want those cars really want them, and they don't want to buy somebody else's old chop. They want to do their own. But since there's no Dynacorn popping out new 50 Merc coupes, it's like, geez, can't we run some of the mauled ones back through the system and get them good looking again?
Yeah.
The funny thing is everybody points at Rebel Without a Cause and James Dean, but I don't know. Is that Mercury that he drives modified at all in that movie? Because it looks pretty stock to me. It might be slightly lowered.
Yeah.
Might have wider than stock white walls on it to get back to tires.
Yeah, it's a good question. I've never thought about. It does look, I guess probably I've always thought it was stock, so I never really looked into it. But it's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, it's like years ago somebody pointed out that although we associate like 50s rock and roll with hot rods, in fact, most of the early hot rodders probably didn't listen to rock and roll. They probably listened to something else. And certainly nobody prior to 1955 that was working on cars was listening to hot rock and roll, because it essentially didn't exist yet.
Yeah,
It was probably like post-war R&B, which is a really sort of overlooked genre now, and it became rock and roll in a way. But cars and music, you can't get past them.
you can't get past it, exactly. Jason did ask a question: how were the illuminated tires from Goodyear and in the 60s illuminated? How did they actually illuminate those? And from what I remember on the Golden Sahara, I should look this up before I say it, but I believe you could not drive with the illuminated tires on it. They had to be put on after it was parked and was going to be stationary, because, of course, they hadn't sorted out how to run the wiring lead into the rim and have it swivel and do everything it would need to stay illuminated and not twist the wiring. So if I recall, again, I'm bringing this up from memory, I haven't done research. I believe the Golden Sahara had to be parked to have the illuminated tires mounted on it.
Now, I wonder if that was true of all of the other illuminated tire concepts of that era. And now I wonder, since we've got regenerative braking and individual wheel motors and stuff, like, now is the time for illuminated tires to come back. Because if you've noticed, there's got to be a federal law on this that I'm not aware of, but every electric car has weird headlights. Like, it's a rule. You're not allowed to put conventional headlights on an electric car. It has to be obvious that it's electric when it's coming at you. Why not the tires too? Light them up, baby. We've got all this electricity. They could light only when they're regenerative charging.
Or I mean, if you use the all of Tesla's work, it is not that hard to broadcast that energy in that close of a proximity to light up the lights inside the tire.
Oh, you mean Tesla the guy, not Tesla the company.
Oh, sorry, Nikola Tesla.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, not the car company, the actual inventor who was a genius.
Not to contrast him with anybody associated with
No, I'm not suggesting anything else. Just saying that
sober genius,
Tesla,
but not being compared to anyone that we would know of from that company.
No.
Now, didn't he claim, speaking of wireless transmission of electricity, didn't he claim to have run, I don't know, like a Packard or something with an electric motor and a receiver antenna on it? Like, no batteries, just wireless transmission.
I don't. Are you saying that he was running the electric motor on, like, to run the car?
Yeah, as in, like, you've got an electric motor bolted to the transmission, but instead of a battery pack feeding it, you've just got the receiver antenna for the wireless transmission of electricity.
I don't recall that. I
mean, it's the internet, so there's all kinds of crazy stuff out there that's not true.
Exactly, and there's probably an AI-generated video of it happening. But I believe, wasn't Tesla involved in figuring out the first, and I think it was a Packard that they used in New York, and they drove behind it and remotely controlled the operations of the car. I thought Tesla had worked on that project.
That actually sounds like probably the original of the garbled story that I got.
Yeah, I think that might be where that's coming from. Is, if I recall correctly, Nikola Tesla, worked with the team that wanted to operate a car remotely, and I'm pretty sure, used a Packard, and they drove it down the streets in New York from the car behind it using wireless signals.
And they called it full self-driving. It wasn't, but it doesn't matter. You can call anything that.
Hey, if no one can see who's doing it, self-driving, baby. Boom.
More importantly, no one can sue who's doing it when they crash.
Exactly. So Well, that's a little off the taboo topic for
I
tonight.
suppose I suppose that is. Well, conspiracy theories.
Well,
That's
they're
the
taboo
taboo.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
This is no driving gloves. When do we ever stay on topic?
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
about yeah, yeah. So then
So I have to
you
ask
know,
you then, is there anything that it offends you as much as skinny white walls offended our listener?
oh, is there any taboo design things, design items that I loathe, if you will? Is that what you're
Yeah.
asking?
Yes.
Wow, that is a good question, Dave. Ah, I hadn't thought about it. I probably should have.
That's why I asked you
Hmm.
first, because I haven't thought about it either.
Oh, okay, good. Uh,
Well, I mean,
how about while we think about that, what's the most taboo thing you've done in a car, Dave?
oh boy. I
Uh,
mean,
I mean, you are a lawyer, so I understand if you need to, what is the
listen,
term?
I
Statute
have
of
not done
limitations.
anything in or out of a car that would get me disbarred. So I'm happy to report that I'm
Oh,
pretty
okay.
safe on that account.
I didn't know if
Um,
statute of limitations, there was something, and I mean, just trying to be safe here.
yeah, no, I mean, probably the worst that I've done is some speeding. I mean, like how fast will this car go kind of speeding, not like I'm in a hurry and all these people are only going 65 kind of speeding. Um, I had a 68 Camaro, as you will recall, with a 327 and a 4 speed. And one day on the highway, it was very early in the morning. The sun was up, but it was like a Sunday, and I was on my way to work. And I was like, I'm just going to see how fast I can make this car go because I've been driving it and I want to know. And so I got to this long, straight, flat stretch of highway, and I just put the pedal down, and it kept going faster and faster and faster. And finally, it kind of stopped accelerating, and it indicated 120 miles per hour. And the front end had gotten kind of light, and it was quivering just a little bit. And I could hear the top had stopped flapping because it was a convertible, and I was really keenly aware that it was a convertible all of a sudden. And so I just put my foot off the accelerator and let it coast back down to 70. And then I saw a cop, and I was like, wow, I have had a very lucky morning, and I continued on my way.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. And then I did that. And we had a 2008 Dodge Charger police car, and I cranked it open one day on the highway, maybe more out of anger than out of curiosity, because there were a lot of idiots about. And I'm pretty sure that I got up to like 109 without really trying. So that would be maybe kind of taboo. I don't normally do that kind of like aggressive driving around people, but really, I mean, like that's nothing. Like if I was a Detroit Lion and I got caught doing that stuff on 696 and I wasn't even nude, like that wouldn't even make the news. It'd be
Yeah. Well, I mean, 696, you got to go 120 or else you're going to get run over anyway.
it's the Detroit Autobahn. If you get on 696, you take your life into your hands.
First time for if we have any Detroit area listeners, which I think we probably do. Seeing Dave and I both are Michiganders by uh, birth. Uh, the first time I got on 696, I had just moved. I literally had moved to Detroit. I had the truck and trailer I was using to move, and I was just following GPS coordinates or MapQuest or whatever it was I was using, and I get on 696 with a truck and trailer, and had never been on 696 before. Yeah, I figured out a few things that day. That was interesting. So, but yeah, I mean, I kind of, I would say, yeah, taboo things in the car for me. Again, it's probably the speeding, right? I mean, when Dave had his 68 Camaro, I had my 74 Pontiac GTO, and there were probably some uneff, you know, I'm trying to think of the word I wanted to use there, but it's escaping my mind right now. But some street racing that shouldn't have happened. Some very high speeds that were obtained, and as Dave said, with most GM muscle and pony cars of that period, uh, they would get light in the front end, pretty much most of them. Their suspension in the front on those cars wasn't always up to high speed handling, let's call it.
And that X body is essentially the same front suspension as my F body was, right? I mean,
It
those
is,
cars are
yeah,
pretty
actually.
closely related.
Yes, the Sled Runner front subframes on those. Yeah. Yeah, and then in vehicles that weren't my vehicle that I was driving for people, again, one time taking a someone's Chevrolet S10, the late '90s, the rounded kind of small S10, if you remember that. I found out what the where the kill chip enacted on those trucks. Yeah, because
This
I
is
was
this
flooring
is the
it down a
computer
back
governor.
road. Yep, I was flooring it down a back road, and all of a sudden, it wasn't accelerating anymore. It's hit the limiter, and it was done. You weren't going any faster. I was like, oh, okay. So learned a lesson that day on what GM did to keep people from speeding.
I loved that era
Excessively
of that
speeding.
truck. That was like, when did those come out? Like 93, 94?
The rounded body style?
Yeah.
I think it would have been 94. Yeah, I think 94 was the first year. Yeah.
They all had the 4.3. Well, I mean, some of them were four cylinders, but the V6 was the 4.3.
Yep.
So that was a great engine at that point. And yeah, we had a 96 Blazer. It was Crystal's mother's car. And that was a fabulous, fabulous machine. I wish we'd never gotten rid of it.
Yeah. Yep. So I'm going to back up because we got some comments from Jason again. And he said two things. Coffee can exhausts are taboo, which I agree, very taboo. And the what is referred to down here as the Carolina lean or the Tennessee tilt, which is when the back
Dance.
end of the truck is dropped and it looks like the dog dragging its butt across the carpet.
Yeah.
That is terrible.
How about these chips now so that your Volkswagen backfires when you rev it up? Have you heard these?
Oh, any of those stupid tuner chips that do that kind of stuff, I just ugh.
But
That
like,
doesn't
in
make sense.
fairness, also rolling coal, not cool.
Oh yeah,
Taboo.
no, totally taboo rolling coal. Yeah, yeah, not.
I mean, nothing says I love cars like my truck is so badly tuned that it's spewing unburned fuel out the tailpipe.
Yeah. Hey, to each their own.
I don't know, man. When it comes to the roadway, sometimes there's got to be rules.
Yeah.
And didn't they make the Carolina lean illegal in the Carolinas?
Yes. Well, in a lot of states, you cannot have it because of the visibility issues. So yes, it is quickly becoming illegal.
I wonder if that's
Mike,
affected dragster style hot rod builds.
yeah, good question. Yeah, Mike Wilkerson jumped in and said the last two vehicles they have owned, we don't eat in them. So evidently, he believes eating in their car is taboo. So
I mean, it definitely helps keep it clean.
that's true. That's true. Try having kids, though. I mean, Dave and I both had. Well, Dave's children are a little older than mine, but he went through the young age of children, and I'm in that phase. So it's really hard to put a no eating in the car rule because you'll drive yourself crazy if you do
You can
that.
have the no eating in the car rule, or you could have the no screaming in the car rule, but you cannot
Exactly.
have both the no eating and the no screaming in the car rule.
Yeah. So
Um,
which is it?
yeah, I myself, as the driver, have always permitted eating so as to avoid the screaming.
The shrill screaming as well. Ugh. So, actually, I will say one thing. So, I've been thinking about what I feel is taboo um, in maybe car design, things like that, or even aftermarket world. But uh, And Jason kind of hit on a few of them. The coffee can exhaust. I think we started covering them. Um, but I don't know if it's that taboo though. Maybe I need to rethink that. I don't know that I like that. Uh, well,
Oh,
I'll just say it.
just
I
spit it
think
out.
just
You can't keep us in suspense like this.
I think like to me like the poorly designed door handles. Can that be taboo? Can that be like I don't know. Like
I
just
don't. I bet. I get it. It's a complaint. Anybody who's like broken a door handle when their car's frozen, I think understands.
but like,
Um,
like a flush mounted one that you have to like, that they can freeze over and you can't get them open or things like that. It's just like, come on. Ugh.
well, there's a reason that car design bureaus are supposed to be based in Detroit, and it's so that they understand that cars have to function both, at 20 degrees below freezing and 120 degrees Fahrenheit,
Yeah.
because it's you get all that in Detroit and you get all that in most of the country. And so if you design your truck in Texas or California, you might think you can get away with things that simply aren't going to fly in the rest of the country. Here's my taboo: unnecessary shrouding and cladding. Like
Mm.
like the panel on top of the engines these days. Like we're not going to style the engine bay anymore. We're just going to put a lid over it, like a little second little hood, so that when you open the main hood,
Yeah.
you're confronted. It should just have a little sticker on it that says "No user serviceable parts inside."
Yeah. And actually, you know what? How about this? All of the electrically operated like door handles, interior door handles, right? The little push button. And I mean, I know there's usually an override somewhere, but come on.
And those overrides are usually flimsy. I don't trust them.
Yeah.
I mean, everything was manual, I mean, that was just the way it was. I mean, like, look at the little mushroom shaped door locks in every car in the 70s and 80s. Like, even when they were power, it was like that was still the main lock. You were just actuating it with a motor, and now everything's motor. Like,
Yeah.
my colleague Dan Stroll wrote a column about this a few years ago, where he was like, how long before even your door handle mechanism is just a button that actuates a motor inside that unlocks or that unlatches the door and pops it open?
We're pretty much
I
there.
mean,
Now, I mean, you can go into the history of that because it's actually very interesting because some of the early safety cars, actually Aurora, which we just finished the restoration of at Lane Motor Museum recently, had electrically operated door latches, as does the Searles Mobile, um, because at the time, one of the biggest concerns was the fact that doors were popping open because of the way the mechanical latch
the
mechanism
latching systems
worked.
work. Yeah.
Right, and the electric, they knew it would keep it closed during an impact, and you wouldn't go flying out of the car because, of course, you didn't have seat belts either. So, in that sense of the, electrically controlled, door latch mechanism, that was forward thinking,
Yeah, but
and
we've since solved that in a purely mechanical way. So why are we
exactly,
continuing to pursue it? Besides,
exactly,
we can, and it might be cheaper. We can
yeah.
use more plastic this way.
Yeah. And Jason brings up gull wing doors on like Mercedes Benz. And of course, DeLorean had it and the Bricklin.
Well, the Mercedes has
All
it for a good reason, and that's because the side rails of the chassis protrude up too far to
exactly.
have a regular door.
Yes. Yeah. That was for the rigidity of the race car and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, what was funny about the Bricklin, which was, of course, the Bricklin
Besides the way
SV.
it looks.
Well, yeah, except the way it looks. But the Bricklin SV1, SV being safety vehicle, right? It had gull wing doors that couldn't be opened, and you could not escape the car if it rolled over and landed on its roof.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Safe except in this one
Yeah.
particular
Yeah.
instance. Oh
So
my word.
Yeah, but also okay. So Jason brings up a good point too. He says, he said door handles, but then he said Corvette does a great job with door handles. Okay, Jason, hear me out, and Dave. I don't know if have you guys this the C7 and C8 Corvettes. I don't know the C8 to me, the C8 more so than the C7. But if you don't own the car and know where the little door handle pad is in the intake cowling for the rear engine, you would have no clue how to open the car. You literally have to know the exact spot to reach under the body molding that comes out where the intake is and actually hit the little pad that is the electric pad, right? That the button to make the door open up.
I will bet Corvette owners love that. It probably feels like being a member of a special club.
Oh,
You
I
got
mean,
to
it's
like
very
know
sleek.
the street knock.
Yeah, I mean, it's very sleek. It takes the door handles, of course, off the door. You shave everything, make it very smooth, as
Same
Jason
reason
says,
custom guys
security
did it then.
feature.
Yeah.
uh, Security feature. Then if they do get in, they probably can't drive a stick. There's the C8's not a stick shift. I mean, maybe in a C7, but yeah, you're afraid I mean, it's paddle and it's all yeah.
It's like a rental car.
Ooh, there we go. Are paddle shifters taboo?
They're awful.
They're awful.
They're neither fish nor fowl nor good red meat. They are in the way, and they allow companies to pretend like they're offering something akin to a manual transmission driving experience when they are not.
Everything he just said.
Yeah. Yeah. See, I think the big problem here is that there's probably not too many things that I hate that you don't, and vice versa.
How about this? Is it taboo that we're getting rid of the manual transmission, the standard transmission, as it was once called?
I am not getting rid of the standard transmission.
Neither
I
am I.
had nothing to do with that decision. And in fact, given my car buying history, the inventory of manual transmission vehicles available to me is vast. But yes, definitely the powers that be at the various car companies have decided that the market no longer demands manual transmissions. And I guess who am I to disagree, right? Like I don't run a big, powerful corporation because I don't trend hump.
You don't what?
Trend hump. It's what it's called. It's what I call it when you decide that something is the coming way and you must be on board with it, even if you don't fully understand it, because that's what the consultants you hired said was hot right now. So you're trend humping.
Uh-huh. So
You won't go find a new trend to start.
we're going real taboo now. We're trend humping.
Yeah. No, they teach you that when you get your MBA. That's as far from taboo as you can get. Never allow new ideas. You want to go with the tried and true that other people have already been doing for 6 months.
Exactly. That's the way the world works, right?
It does. I don't know that it's the best way that it could work, but it is definitely the way it works.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if we were quite taboo enough on the show, but hopefully we hit some of the taboo topics in the automotive world and had a little fun tonight. So I think we're going to get ready to wrap this episode up and, get ready to plan for next week, whatever we're going to talk about then that we won't stay on topic about. So, with that being said, I want to remind you guys that if you guys like what you see and you like what you hear when you listen to us, don't forget to follow us, like us, subscribe us, do all those fancy things. If you want to buy us a coffee, there's a QR code on the screen. All those good things because, as I like to say, if you share the show, then it'll grow. So, let's get a little taboo and make things grow. And but with that, Dave, you got any last words for the audience here?
Thanks for stopping by the garage.
All right. And as I mentioned in the pre-show, the last taboo thing I will leave you with is that the back seat of the super cab, or extended cab as I call it, F-150, is a little more spacious than you'd think it is. So with that, have a good night, guys, and hopefully John's on the other end to hit that end button. So we will see you next week.